Hello there, here we are again at Hidden Spotlight Treasures, and we have found some amazing items for you this time, like the German Weimar marks. Back in the 1920s, the German currency collapsed. We're going to be showing you some of these, and plus we are still digging into the photograph collection. You would not believe it. There are literally millions of photographs in this collection, from entertainment and political people. You just would not believe how much stuff we have in this collection. It could take us possibly years to go through it. Let's take a look. Our story today is about Rod Serling. You know him from the famous Twilight Zone series. We have found his last letter that he ever wrote before his death in 1975. I'm going to show you the letter. And we also have another letter from 1971. So first off, who was the letter sent to? The man's name is Sig Sakowicz. He's sitting there on the left. That was his Chicago TV show. Sig Sakowicz was a Chicago TV and radio personality. So these letters I'm going to show you was Rod Serling and Sig corresponding between each other. Before we get to the letter, I thought I'd show you this. You remember the TV show back in the 1970s, WKRP in Cincinnati? Well, by coincidence, Rod Serling, many years prior, worked for a TV station in Cincinnati. It was called WKRC in Cincinnati. I thought that was an interesting bit of TV trivia. Now, one more thing before we get to the letter. Apparently, Rod liked dictating machines. I think they also called them dictaphones. You'll find out why that is so important later in the story. So here we go. So unfortunately, Rod was a heavy smoker and he died June 28th, 1975. Now here is the letter coming from Rod Serling, dated June 9th, 1975. This is the last letter that Rod Serling ever wrote before his death in June 28th, 1975. As we said before, he wrote this letter to Mr. Sig Sakowicz, the Chicago TV and radio personality. Now, this is where it's sort of interesting because he's telling Sig that he's recuperating. Unfortunately, the post-coronary recuperative period makes it damn difficult to talk on the phone or engage in any prolonged conversation. And he adds, "May I have a rain check, please?" Even in the end, he was very optimistic and very professional. Now here's where we were earlier talking about the dictaphone. And it says, his secretary right here says that Mr. Serling is unfortunately not feeling very well, but he used the dictaphone belt to write this letter, which I thought was very interesting. Now let's go to a letter he wrote a few years earlier in 1971, where he wrote to Sig when Sig lived in Chicago and he had his TV show there, and he was basically telling Sig that he doesn't have a lot of time in Chicago, usually enough time for a martini, and he's off. So let's see, here's another letter from 1971. Okay, this letter is Sig writing back to Rod Serling. Now what I like about this letter is at the end of the letter is the part I like the best. He says, "If you ever need a fat bartender or an undertake for the night gallery show, just call." So that was a joke because if you saw the earlier picture of Sig, he was slightly overweight. So I don't know if he ever got the fat bartender role, but we'll find out because we're going through Sig's files and he knows just about everybody and he's done quite a bit. So here we go. Let's go back to this letter again and let me read it there. It says, "My infrequent trips to Chicago usually find me there long enough for a martini, 30 seconds of tape, and then I'm off again." This is basically, and look at the signature there. That's how Rod Serling normally signed his name. But then we'll go over here, and this is when he's sick in the hospital 2 weeks before his death, and the secretary signed it, Rod Serling. So that is a little bit of information on how the secretary signs his name, and then how he really signs his name. And this is the last letter that Rod Serling ever wrote. It was dated June 9th, 1975, and he made it with the Dictaphone. Apparently they had a Dictaphone belt that he could wear, and wherever he went, he could dictate a letter. Thank you.
Set your watches and come on in. This cigarette, Chesterfield King, gives all the advantages of extra length and much more. The great taste of 21 vintage tobaccos, grown mild, aged mild, and blended mild. No wonder they satisfy so completely.